Where do I even start with this guy? He's insane. There's so much here that I can cover, but I don't know where to start with it. I guess to start out, his relic is really powerful. Every time you play 3 cards in a turn, he draws another card. He just has a built-in draw mechanic, which is insanely strong. But from here, things just get extremely complicated very quickly. You see, this character, it wasn't enough just to give them like 1 new thing or 2 new mechanics. He's got a million things happening that are unique to him. Are they bad ideas? No, I actually think a lot of what this guy does is super cool and super interesting. It's just that there's so much happening all at once, it's extremely overwhelming. Even after having played with him, I still would not be able to tell you what most of the things he does is doing. I mean, like, the best way I can describe this guy is if you took every character and made it into one. So you've got stances like the Watcher, you've got these swords that work like the orbs on the defect, you have insane draw like the Silent, and you've got super powerful attacking cards like the Ironclad. And if you've ever played the Downfall mod, then he also kind of works, I believe, a little bit like the Champ, where he has finisher cards. And even then, it doesn't work quite the same. You see, these finisher cards rely on building up new resources that are exclusive to this character. That being Combo and Fury. Now, to build Combo, every time you play a card it'll go up by 1, and some cards will also just inherently increase that combo. And to build Fury, you have to do damage, with some cards also just giving you more Fury. Now, finishers, depending on what it is, will say, hey, if you have X amount of Fury, you consume that Fury and you can use the card. And same with Combo. If you have X amount of combo, you can consume that combo and it uses the finisher. And these finisher cards usually cost 0, so it's essentially like you're using your energy to build up another resource that's kind of used like energy. So you're essentially getting these free, very powerful cards to play. And don't forget, like I said, his relic he starts with makes it so that he draws another card for every 3 cards he plays. So think of it like this, you could use 2 strikes, get enough Fury to use a 0-cost card that does a bunch of damage, and now you still have another energy, but you've drawn another card and you can play whatever you want still. So even though it's called a finisher, it doesn't have to be the final move you use, it doesn't end your turn or anything, they're just really powerful cards that rely on another resource. Now, that's simple enough to understand, but now let's get into where it gets even more complicated, is his stance changes. This guy has 3 stances. He has normal stance, which is nothing, and then wind stance and lightning stance. Now, this isn't like the Watcher, where when you enter a stance, you just get some sort of universal ability. Because with the Watcher, if you enter calm, it's just whenever you leave calm, then you gain energy. And if you enter wrath, you get double damage, but receive double damage. And when you enter divinity, then, well, you just get triple damage. You know, a little complicated at first, but simple enough to understand. But with the Blade Dancer, there's a lot more nuance to it. There's a lot more happening here. You see, with the Blade Dancer, there's no reason to never be in a stance at all. There's just not any drawbacks. The one drawback that'll come with being in a stance is if you use a card that would make you go into that same stance, you'll get a curse in your deck. It only lasts for that combat, but it'll end up being a dead draw. That, I think, is a cool way of balancing, except this character is just already so powerful, it doesn't really matter if you have that card or not. So what do these stances actually do, right? Well, they don't really have any specific things that happen. They actually change how your cards behave, and that's on a card-by-card basis. You see, some cards, especially finishers, will change the abilities that they have on them depending on the stance that you're in. There's some cards you can only play if you're in a stance. And there's some cards that are almost useless unless you're in a stance. But that's not where it ends either. If you're paying attention to the footage, you'll see there's a blue orb and a green orb above the character. Now those go to their respective stance, green being wind, blue being lightning. And you can also see there's numbers associated with it, ranging from 0 to however much. Now to build that number up, you have to enter a stance first, and then whenever you play a card, it'll add 1 number to the orb. And anytime you switch a stance, you can actually conserve how much charges you have on that orb and then just use the other one. But this number is important because depending on how many charges you have in your stance, it'll impact how the cards using the stance will perform. So for some cards, you need so much charges in your stance, and then you get some kind of effect from it. One of the starting cards in your deck will consume all of it just to deal damage to every enemy. But both stances will give different effects to your different cards that are impacted by it. Which also means, if you're hovering over a card that is impacted by stance changes, you have an insane amount of stuff to read. But don't think that's the end of it either, because if you're paying attention to the footage, you also see swords floating above this guy's head. Now these swords kind of work like lightning orbs, except way more powerful. Every time you attack an enemy, the sword will also do damage. And I think there might even be different kinds of swords you can summon. I'm honestly not even sure, because there was so much text on all these cards, it's really hard to understand what everything is. So now there's this whole other thing just with the swords where they're doing damage, and depending on what you're doing, it'll do different things. I'm not even sure everything that they're capable of doing. I think there might be a way to evoke them so they do more damage, but I'm not even sure what does that, honestly. Can you tell I'm flabbergasted? Like, I don't really know what I'm talking about. But again, we're still not even done with everything that this character introduces. He also has a brand new status effect called Bleeding. You see, Bleeding is like a mix between vulnerable and poison. And yes, it's just as strong as it sounds. So when an enemy's bleeding, you'll do 20% more damage when you attack them. Then at the start of the enemy's turn, they will take that much bleed damage that you have stacked on it, and then it decays by 3 every round. I mean, as you can see, it's not that complicated, but it's a really strong status effect. But wait, there's still more that this character has. If you look at the top left, underneath of my relics, you probably notice there's these weird icons. Now what these icons are perks that you get after killing an elite. So after you beat an elite, you'll get a choice of 2 perks on top of a relic. And these perks range from giving you extra strength, extra dexterity, making bleed stronger, making your stances stronger. There's so many different things that these perks actually do. And that's why this character is just so powerful. Because not only do they already have a bunch of busted cards and things happening with their cards, they also have these perks that make everything they do even stronger. One thing that becomes really obvious while playing this character is that there is a lot of care and effort that was put into making this character. I do want to just say, you can tell there is a lot of care put into this. Somebody wanted to make a character and all these ideas they had, and they did it. And honestly, I had fun with it, even though it was kind of overwhelming and too complicated. But as you play, you just kind of get really strong, and you can just start playing cards and not really care about what they do. It's kind of like a head empty character, like a lot of people think the Watcher is. But again, it's just a really overwhelming character. There's so much going on, so many numbers, so many new things. It's a lot to take in. But I really like all the ideas that this mod creator came up with. I think the idea of having perks after an elite is super cool. I like the idea of having stances that change the way your cards behave. I think the channeling the blades thing is really interesting. Even the whole finisher thing I think is pretty cool. It's just that when you have it all in one character, all working simultaneously at the same time, you get a very broken mess. And I don't mean broken mess as in oh, this doesn't work. I mean, they are overpowered, broken, busted, just too strong for the game. It honestly just feels like the mod creator had a bunch of really cool ideas, but instead of making a different character for each idea, they just put it all onto one character. Because honestly, these ideas are all pretty well fleshed out as is, and they would all work really well as the center of attention for just different characters. Like, if this character only focused on the stance changing mechanic, it would be a way more balanced character. Or if this character only focused on the mechanic of channeling blades, it would be way more balanced. Or if they only focused on doing status ailments and including bleed as a new one. Do you kind of see what I'm getting at here? The mod creator is going for so many different ideas all at once that you don't get as in depth with each mechanic, but it's fleshed out enough and has enough going on for it that when you work with all of it together, the character is just super strong. And that's not to mention that just the cards alone are very useful. Like I said, it's mixing all the different characters together so you have crazy good draw cards like the Silent, but you're also getting more benefit out of it. I mean, think about something like Acrobatics with the Silent. You draw 3 or 4 cards and you have to discard one. And discard can have a downside to it. If you don't have anything that synergizes with it, then you just have to get rid of a card, and maybe you don't want to get rid of any cards in your hand. Well, this guy, he's got a card called Flurry, where he'll draw 2 or 3 cards depending on if it's upgraded or not, but then he'll also channel one of his blades. And that's just a common card. That's an extremely powerful common card, to say the least. That's like if you used Skim on the defect and it not only drew a couple cards, but it also gave you an orb. And I believe Skim is an uncommon card, because Draw is just a really powerful thing to have. Maybe you want a more obvious example of a really strong card. You see, the Silent has Backflip, where you gain some block, then you draw a card or two. Well, you see, this guy has Front Flip, where you gain block, but then you draw 3 cards. And not only do you draw 3 cards and gain block, but you also do Conduit too. And Conduit is one of these new mechanics where whenever you have Conduit, it'll add that many to your charges and your stance. And let's still not forget, this guy's relic he comes with is every time he plays 3 cards, he draws another card. You can play a Front Flip plus, draw 3 cards and block, and then play another card, and then play a 0 cost card, and then you can just draw again, and it could be another Front Flip, and you can just keep drawing. And I also should mention, Front Flip is a common card. This is something you can easily find in your playthrough. So yes, this character is just insanely overpowered, but it's still fun in the sense of head empty, just want to win. And all the footage you're watching is from my one playthrough I did with this guy, and I was able to beat the heart with absolutely no problems. And you'll probably also see there's a shit ton of damage numbers, and I could not explain to you where any of it is coming from. Some of it's coming from my cards doing damage, some of it's coming from my stance things doing stuff, some of it's coming from the blades that are channeled. I just don't even know where all the damage comes from at this point. But I'm gonna cut myself short here and not try to over-explain everything going on. There's so much happening with this character, I could make a much longer video just explaining all of it. And with that, if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe for more. If you want to check out the mod because you think it's interesting, it's called the Blade Dancer. I'll throw the link in the description to the Steam Workshop page. If anyone does want to see like an in-depth thing about this guy, just leave a comment and I'll play more with him and do something. But other than that, I'm doing daily uploads up until Christmas. Today's the 20th day, so there's only 5 days remaining. And I'm doing a collage every day to commemorate all the stuff that I upload throughout the month. So I'm going to just play that in the background for now. And that's about it. See ya.